Imagine walking into a grocery store where the price of a loaf of bread is literally half what you pay at the nearest competitor. Where the store itself feels like a secret bunker, concrete floors, pallets of goods stacked to the ceiling, a layout so efficient it almost feels cold. Now imagine that this store, this no-frills fortress of frugality, is not some local oddity but a multinational juggernaut, quietly amassing over 100 billion euros in annual revenue. This is the story of Lidl. And the most shocking part? For decades, almost nobody outside of Germany had ever heard of them. How did a small, obscure German grocer, born in a tiny post-war village, grow to challenge the very foundations of European retail? And more importantly, why did the entire industry fail to see it coming until it was far, far too late? The year is 1930. Germany is still reeling from the Great Depression. A man named Joseph Schwartz joins his father's small fruit wholesaling business in Heilbronn, a city in the southwest. It's a humble operation, nothing special. But Joseph had a sharp eye for efficiency. He saw that the middlemen were bleeding the system dry, taking a cut for storage, for transportation, for just existing. So he did something radical. He cut them out. He started buying directly from producers, bypassing the wholesalers entirely. This simple, brutal logic, eliminate the cost, lower the price, became the genetic code of the company. In 1954, Joseph's son, Dieter Schwartz, took over. Dieter was not a flamboyant entrepreneur. He was quiet, intensely private, almost reclusive. In fact, to this day, there are almost no public photos of him. But he understood something that would become the cornerstone of Lidl's entire strategy: the customer's loyalty is not to the brand. It's to the price. In the 1970s, Dieter opened the first Lidl discount store in a small town called Bad Wimpfen. The name Lidl? He bought it from a retired teacher who owned the rights to the name. The store was bare. No fancy shelving, no music, no bags. You brought your own or you carried it. Prices were rock bottom. And people flocked to it. But here is where the story gets interesting. While Lidl was growing, a rival was rising in the same country. A company called Aldi. Aldi had already perfected the hard discount model. They were leaner, meaner, and had a massive head start. So how did Lidl, the latecomer, the second mover, ever stand a chance? The answer is a strategic masterstroke that almost nobody talks about. Aldi's model was built on simplicity. They stocked only about 600 items. Every product had one option. One ketchup. One pasta. One coffee. It was ruthlessly efficient. But it was also a limitation. Lidl looked at this and said, what if we offer choice, but only where it matters? They expanded their range to around 1,200 items, still tiny by supermarket standards, but double Aldi's. And crucially, they introduced a rotating selection of non-food products. 1 week, power tools. The next week, children's pajamas. The week after, a kayak. Yes, a kayak. This was the middle of Lidl strategy. It created a sense of urgency, of treasure hunting. You never knew what you'd find. This drove foot traffic like crazy. But more importantly, it gave Lidl a massive data advantage. They could see exactly which products moved, at which stores, at which prices. They were learning the art of the pivot before the term even existed. By the late 1980s, Lidl had over 800 stores in Germany. But Dieter Schwartz had a problem. Germany was saturated. The only way to grow was to go international. And that is where most retailers die. Let's pause and consider the stakes. Going international is not just about copying your model and slapping it in a new country. It's a war of local tastes, local regulations, local supply chains. Most companies fail. Walmart, the largest retailer in the world, spent over $20 billion trying to crack Germany and failed so miserably they had to retreat entirely. They lost billions. The German consumer was too savvy, too price-conscious. And yet, Lidl, a German company, decided to do the exact opposite. They would take their German model to the rest of Europe. In 1989, they opened their first store outside Germany, in France. And this is where the execution phase of the story becomes a masterclass in patience and precision. Lidl did not rush. They did not blitz. They systematically studied each market. They built regional distribution centers that were so efficient, they could supply a store with fresh goods every single day, while keeping inventory costs near zero. They used a cluster strategy. Instead of opening one store in a country and hoping for the best, they would open 10, 20, 50 stores in a single region simultaneously. This allowed them to dominate local supply chains and crush competitors on price from day one. By the year 2000, Lidl had over 3,000 stores across Europe. But they were still a shadow. They were making money, but they were not a brand. That changed in the 2010s, when they made a decision that seemed to contradict everything they stood for. They decided to go upmarket. Gently. They realized that the hard discount model had a ceiling. You can only sell so many cheap canned goods. The real money, the growth, comes from capturing the middle-class shopper who wants quality but still hates paying full price. So Lidl started investing in their own premium private labels. They created a line of organic products. They improved the design of their stores, adding wider aisles, better lighting, even a bakery at the entrance. The smell of fresh bread, warm and inviting, was a weapon. They hired top-tier sommeliers to curate their wine selection. They started winning international awards for their products. In 2017, Lidl's own brand champagne beat out major French houses in a blind taste test. Think about that. A discount grocery store out-champagned the experts. This was not an accident. It was a calculated assault on the perception of value. The message was clear: you don't have to sacrifice quality to save money. You just have to shop here. By 2018, Lidl had over 10,000 stores in 29 countries. Their revenue hit €100 billion. They had become the largest grocery chain in Germany, surpassing Aldi. They were now the dominant player in multiple European markets. And yet, the most dramatic chapter was just beginning. The United Kingdom. The UK grocery market is one of the most competitive in the world. The Big Four, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrisons, had ruled it for decades. They had loyalty programs, massive advertising budgets, and a deep understanding of the British shopper. Lidl entered the UK in 1994, but for years, they were a sideshow. A strange German store where you had to pay for bags and the labels were confusing. The Big Four barely noticed them. That was their mistake. Lidl used that period of neglect to build a fortress. They acquired land in prime locations, slowly, quietly. They optimized their supply chain so that by the time the Big Four woke up, Lidl could undercut them on price by up to 20% on everyday essentials. And then came the tipping point. The 2008 financial crisis. When the recession hit, millions of British households suddenly needed to stretch every pound. Lidl was ready. They didn't just offer low prices, they offered dignity. They improved the shopping experience. They started advertising with a sense of humor, poking fun at the stuffy pretension of the traditional supermarkets. Big on quality, Lidl on price. It was simple, direct, and devastating. By 2023, Lidl had captured over 8% of the UK grocery market. That might not sound like much, but in a market worth over £200 billion, 8% is £16 billion of revenue. And the Big Four? They have been forced into a brutal price war, squeezing their own margins to compete. Some, like Morrisons, have been bought out by private equity. Others, like Asda, are struggling under mountains of debt. Lidl did not just enter the market. They reshaped it. So who lost? The answer is almost everyone who refused to adapt. Aldi, of course, is still a fierce competitor. In fact, the two German discounters have been locked in a silent, mutually assured destruction for decades, constantly undercutting each other by pennies. But the real losers are the traditional mid-tier supermarkets. The ones that tried to be everything to everyone: quality, price, selection, service. They got squeezed from both ends. Lidl and Aldi took the price-sensitive customers. Waitrose and M&S took the premium customers. The middle got hollowed out. This is the lesson that every business should engrave into their strategy. You cannot compete on price if you do not have a cost structure built for it. Lidl's entire operation is a machine designed to eliminate waste. Their stores are small, about 1,000 square meters. Their staff are cross-trained to do everything. Their inventory turns over faster than almost any other retailer. They do not advertise on primetime TV, they rely on word of mouth and the sheer shock of the price tag. Every decision, from the concrete floors to the lack of price-checking scanners, is a deliberate choice to shave off a fraction of a cent. And those fractions add up to billions. What does this all mean? The rise of Lidl is not just a story about groceries. It is a story about the power of a clear, uncompromising strategy. Dieter Schwartz never wanted to be the biggest. He wanted to be the most efficient. He understood that in business, you can either be the cheapest, or the best, or the most convenient. But if you try to be all three, you end up being none. Lidl chose cheap. Then they added quality. Then they added convenience. But they never lost the core. They never forgot that the customer's primary job, when they walk into a grocery store, is to spend as little as possible for what they need. Every year, billions of euros move from the pockets of traditional retailers to Lidl's bottom line. And the scariest part? They are not done. They are now moving into the United States, slowly, methodically, building their network in the eastern seaboard. They have over 150 stores there already. And if their history is any guide, they are just waiting for the right moment to strike. The question is not whether Lidl will disrupt the American market. The question is whether the American giants will see it coming before it is too late. Because if there is one thing this story teaches us, it is that the quietest competitors are often the most dangerous. And in the world of grocery retail, the war is never over. It just gets cheaper.